In the heart of Benin, where the red earth baked under the heavy sun and the winds whispered stories through the tall grasses, there stood a village that had once thrived with abundance. Its name was Akoko, a place where yams grew thick and rivers sang through the trees. But seasons had changed, rain clouds had grown shy, the riverbeds cracked into empty gaping mouths, the forests thinned. Hunger, a silent and merciless visitor, had crept into Akoko, gnawing away at its spirit. Among the villagers lived a woman named Adesua. She was neither the oldest nor the strongest, but in her chest beat a heart of iron and honey, hard enough to endure, soft enough to nourish. Adesua was a mother of 5, widow to a man who had once been the village storyteller, lost too soon to a fever carried by the river mist. Her days were stitched with sacrifice, rising before the first rooster, walking miles barefoot to search for roots, weaving baskets from brittle reeds to trade for handfuls of grain. She had nothing left but her children, her prayers, and the stories her husband had told her, stories of the Orishas, spirits of the earth and sky. Among them she loved most the stories of Oya, the fierce mother of change, of storms, of winds that tear down the old to make way for the new. At night, when her children whimpered from hunger, Adesua would hold them close and whisper, "Remember, my loves, even in the fiercest storm, Oya rides not to destroy, but to renew. We are stronger than this hunger. We are stronger because we endure." But words, however sweet, could not fill empty bellies. Day after day, Adesua watched her children grow thinner, their laughter shrinking into silence. Her youngest, little Ife, clung to her skirts with a frailty that tore at Adesua's soul. Her eldest, Tunde, a boy of only 10, tried to mask his hunger with bravado, claiming he was saving strength for the fields. But there were no crops to tend, only dust and broken dreams. The elders spoke of leaving Akoko, of scattering into the cities, of begging in markets where their names would mean nothing. But Adesua could not bear the thought of abandoning the land that held the bones of her ancestors, the songs of her people. She needed a miracle. And miracles, she knew, did not fall from the sky. They were summoned, called forth with sweat, with tears, with unbreakable will. And so, one morning, when the sun rose like a heavy coin above the cracked fields, Adesua made a choice. She would call upon Oya. Not with fine offerings, she had none left, not with grand ceremonies, there was no time. She would offer the only thing she had left, herself. She wrapped her body in the last clean cloth she owned, a faded wrapper dyed the color of ripe mangoes. She braided her hair back from her face so that the winds could read her soul clearly. She kissed each of her sleeping children on the forehead. Then she set out alone, barefoot across the brittle fields toward the ancient grove where the spirits were said to listen more closely. The ground was hot, biting at her soles. The air was thick, stealing her breath. Yet she walked, head high, heart steady, whispering the names of her ancestors under her breath, each step a prayer, each prayer a spark against the darkness gathering around her. The grove was older than memory, a hidden place where the trees grew thick and tangled, their roots like veins in the blood-red earth. It was said that spirits dwelled in the hush beneath the canopy, and those who entered without respect risked losing more than their way. Adesua approached with reverence. She knelt at the base of the tallest tree, a towering iroko whose trunk bore scars older than the village itself, and placed her palms against the rough bark. Her voice, when it came, was steady. "Oya, mother of winds, bringer of change, hear me!" The trees swayed lightly, though no breeze stirred. Adesua closed her eyes. She did not ask for riches. She did not plead for easy salvation. She asked only for strength, enough to endure, enough to feed the fire within her children's fragile bodies, enough to carve a path through the storm. Her prayer was not elaborate. It was raw, stitched from hunger and hope and bone-deep love. And then, as she pressed her forehead to the earth, she felt it. A stirring, not outside her but within. The air around her seemed to hum, a vibration that danced through her veins. Her hair lifted slightly, touched by an unseen hand. The scent of rain filled her nose, sharp, electric, though the sky above remained dry and cloudless. She stood slowly, feeling a strength she had thought long extinguished ignite once more. When she opened her eyes, she did not see Oya. No great apparition split the sky, but she saw a path, a trail almost hidden among the undergrowth, leading deeper into the forgotten parts of the land. Without hesitation, she followed. The way was harsh. Thorns tore at her legs, roots snagged her steps. Branches whipped across her arms, yet with every obstacle she grew fiercer, as if Oya herself lent her breath and fury. Hours passed. Her stomach growled, her throat ached with thirst. Still she moved forward, driven by a force larger than fear, larger than pain. And then, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, Adesua stumbled into a clearing. There, where the forest grew wild and the river had long been thought dead, was life. Hidden by thickets and neglect, a patch of fertile ground thrived. Cassava plants spread their green fingers across the soil. Wild yams bulged beneath the surface. Fruit trees heavy with mangoes, guavas, and oranges drooped low with offerings. Adesua fell to her knees, tears blurring her vision. It was as if Oya had blown back the curtain of despair to reveal a hidden blessing, not a gift without effort, but a reward for her faith, her endurance, her refusal to surrender. Laughing and crying at once, she began to dig with her bare hands, her fingers clawing at the rich earth. She unearthed a yam, plump and golden. She plucked mangoes so ripe they bled juice down her arms. She worked until her body could move no more, until the stars blinked awake above her, and the crickets resumed their endless hymn. Only then did she gather her bounty into the folds of her cloth, bundling the precious food close to her chest, as if carrying newborns. And with Oya's winds at her back, she began the journey home. The path back to Akoko seemed shorter, as if the earth itself, now blessed by Oya's breath, hastened Adesua's steps. When she reached the outskirts of the village, night had fully descended. Only the soft glow of scattered fires lit the broken landscape. She stumbled through the familiar ruins, her bundle heavy against her back, her heart hammering with urgency and joy. At the threshold of her home, a simple hut with a roof patched by prayer and stubbornness, she found her children huddled together, their faces pale in the dim light. Tunde was the first to see her. "Mama!" he gasped, his voice cracking between disbelief and hope. Adesua dropped to her knees and unwrapped the bundle. The sweet scent of ripe fruit and fresh yams filled the small space like a holy perfume. The children surged forward with cries that were half laughter, half sobbing. If the youngest buried her face in Adesua's shoulder, her thin arms clutching tightly, Tunde helped distribute the food, his hands trembling. Adesua fed them slowly, carefully, morsels at a time, as not to shock their weakened bodies. As they ate, life returned to their eyes, color to their cheeks, laughter to their lips. And in that laughter, Adesua heard it, the music of resilience, the song of survival. Word spread quickly through Akoko. Neighbors came, drawn by the impossible scent, by the whispers that Adesua had found life where none thought it could exist. Some looked on with wonder, others with suspicion. How had she found food when the land had withered and the rivers had died? But when Adesua told her story, not boasting but humbly, with reverence, even the most doubtful could feel the truth humming in her words. "Oya showed me the way," she said simply. "Through the storm, through the hunger, through my fear, she carried me. She showed me that life hides where the eyes of despair are blind." The elders gathered in council beneath the great baobab tree. They listened to Adesua's account, watched her children nibbling slices of mango, their smiles shy and dazzling. After a long silence, Baba Oloran, the eldest among them, rose and spoke. "It is not only Adesua who has been blessed," he said. "It is all of us. Through her faith, through her courage, the spirit of renewal has returned to Akoko." The next morning, Adesua did not rest. She rose with the sun, gathered her cloth once more, and led a small group of villagers along the hidden path she had discovered. Together, they cleared the overgrowth, dug into the fertile soil, and unearthed treasures the village had believed lost forever. Cassava, yams, fruits heavy with promise. Laughter rang out among the fields. Songs, real songs, not just broken memories, floated into the sky. Children raced barefoot through the groves. Women clapped rhythms into the air. Men, once bowed by hunger, stood tall and sang with their hands. It was not a return to what was before. It was something new, something built from the ashes, stitched together by will, by faith, and by the invisible, unstoppable breath of Oya. And at the center of it all, Adesua stood, not a queen, not a warrior, but a mother whose love had defied despair and awakened life once more. As the weeks turned to months, the hidden grove that Adesua had discovered became the new heart of Akoko. The villagers tended the fields with reverence, whispering prayers of thanks each time a yam was lifted from the earth or a mango plucked from the branch. Children were taught to honor the spirits of the land, to sing to the winds before harvest, to dance barefoot on the warm earth after the rains. But it was not enough, the elders agreed, to harvest quietly. They needed to remember. They needed to celebrate the miracle that had saved them, not just the food itself, but the spirit that had led them back from the brink. And so they created the Festival of the Winds, a new tradition, born from hunger, from survival, and from the breath of Oya herself. Each year, when the first fruits ripened, the people of Akoko gathered at the grove. They wore garments dyed in swirling patterns of red and white, the sacred colors of Oya. They braided their hair with beads and feathers, symbols of the storm and the bird that rides its winds. The festival began at sunset, when the sky blazed gold and crimson. The elders told the story, how a mother's love, fierce and unyielding, had carried her through the wilderness, how her faith had called Oya to open the earth's hidden bounty, how their village had been reborn not through riches or violence, but through hope, courage, and unity. Then the drums began, a deep, throbbing rhythm that made the very ground seem to pulse with life. Women and men, young and old, danced in wide, joyous circles. They spun and leapt, their movements wild and free, like the winds that had once threatened to destroy them and now lifted them higher. In the center of it all, Adesua danced, not as a savior, not as a legend, but as a woman, flesh and blood, spirit and will, who had once knelt in the dust and dared to rise again. Her children danced beside her, laughing, stronger now than they had ever been. The winds lifted the edges of her wrapper, playing in her hair, kissing her skin. Some swore that if you looked closely you could see the air shimmer around her, as if Oya herself danced just a breath away, smiling. And even as Adesua grew older, her back bending with the years, she never missed a festival of the winds. She would sit beneath the great baobab, surrounded by grandchildren, and tell the story once more, not to boast, but to remind them, "Storms will come," she would say, "hunger will come, fear will come. But remember, inside you, there is a river that does not dry, a fire that does not die. It is the gift of our ancestors. It is the breath of Oya, and it is stronger than anything that tries to break you." And so the winds carried the songs of Akoko across the plains and rivers, over hills and into distant lands, a whisper of resilience, a hymn of hope, born from the unbreakable spirit of a mother who dared to defy despair. And in every gust of wind that touched the earth with wild, laughing fingers, her story lived on.